Tuesday night, so there's a few questions to answer. First question. When we practice Buddhist rituals, how should we practice without becoming attached? Well, I guess you could say a Buddhist ritual is specifically for reducing and ending attachment. Attachment, if you're referring to upadana, clinging or attachment, which is fed by craving, which originates from ignorance. Any part of the Buddhist practice or path is for reducing attachment. So that includes rituals. But of course, as we know, it's attachment to external practices and rituals is one of the 3 fetters, or one of the 10 fetters, but one of the first 3 fetters that a stream enterer abandons. But it's one of the things we've got to get straight in our understanding or our view of practice. That practicing a ritual with wrong view or without mindfulness and understanding or with false expectations will not lead to the end of suffering or the reduction of attachment. It will increase attachment and therefore lead to more suffering. So like before the Buddha came into the world, there were plenty of religions and religious practices and rituals. So a very common one in India, ancient India, was sacrifice, like making sacrifices to the gods, making offerings, rituals involving making offerings to the gods, praying to the gods, reciting verses, or actually making sacrifices, including animal sacrifices, killing animals. That's one thing the Buddha worked hard to discourage and guide people to go beyond. Say, a ritual that involves sacrificing, harming another being cannot possibly free your mind from craving and attachment. It only increases that, it only increases the negative karma you make and leads to more ignorance arising in your mind. So he worked hard to teach people to change their ways and some of their attachments. Was it, I think the king, which king, I can't remember, maybe King Pasenadi came to the Buddha because he was sick, and one of his Brahmin advisors said he has to make special sacrifices to the gods to get better. And the Buddha said, well, how can killing animals make you better? It's only going to cause those animals suffering, and then it's going to bring you regret because you're killing. It just won't work. So a lot of rituals, people have a belief in a ritual where they're attached to the ritual, thinking by practicing this it's going to give me what I want, spiritual progress, purify me, get me beyond my bad karma in one way or another. But if it's done with wrong view, and if the actual ritual itself is a harmful act, then it's not going to help. And even Buddhist rituals can become a blind attachment, can't they? You do your meditation, or you do your chanting, but in a way that you're performing it just as a kind of a perfunctory habitual thing without developing clarity from mindfulness, clear comprehension, without developing wise reflection, then even though you might actually perform the act of sitting in meditation or chanting some words, won't necessarily improve the quality of your mind or reduce the attachment in your mind if it's not done with mindfulness and clear understanding. We can sit cross-legged, but if we don't have right view, we might just be sitting there and letting our mind go all over the place, or we may be full of different kinds of beliefs, some of them may be not correct. And if we're not questioning or looking into them, the physical body is sitting there apparently meditating, but the mind may be not progressing at all, maybe even regressing. Or very common, we make offerings, don't we, to monks, and we are wishing for things. We do a ritual like to offer sanghadana, or offer robes, or offer food, and in our mind we may be clinging to some idea we want, some result from this offering we're making. So I offer this, and then I want that in return. I want to be free from my bad karma. I want to be free from my illness. I want to be free from some problem I have in my life. And so we've already set up the causes for more attachment and more suffering, because we're doing it in a way it's like a transaction. But if you're offering to reduce or let go of your clinging to material things, clinging to your thoughts of stinginess, clinging to various selfish ideas you may have, then the offering can be part of the path, and it may be done in a ritualized fashion. One of the reasons, say, temples, monasteries have rituals is because it's a way when many people come to the temple or the monastery to do something good. The ritual gives some structure to the activity. So it could be chanting, meditation, making offerings, and you have a number of people doing it together. So you may, on the outside, somebody looking in might say, well, that's just some ritual they're all doing. They're bowing down to a Buddha statue, they're chanting. That looks like, some foolishness to me. Actually, it depends on the state of mind and the qualities of mind that are being brought up at that time. And it can be a way that many people can act together to do something good. If everyone is practicing on their own individually, well, that may work, but it also may lead to scattered energy and wrong views in another way, without communicating and receiving instruction or reflecting on the Dhamma. Maybe everyone just doing their own practice can also not lead to good results. So if done skillfully, rituals can be a cause for people to come together in harmony and do something good together, and you get some group energy and some support doing that. And it can be a way, it can be a part of the practice, a skillful means in your practice. And just like bowing to a Buddha statue, you could say, well, that just looks like an empty gesture, or it's just blind attachment to rites and rituals. But if done with mindfulness and wise reflection, it can be a useful way to remember the Buddha, our teacher, and the qualities of the Buddha and the teachings of the Buddha. And when you bow, if you're bringing up mindfulness as you do it, your mind can be developing very skillful states of mind. Your mind can be brightening, becoming more wholesome, if it's done with the right attitude and done as a practice. So we have to investigate, if we are doing any kind of ritual, you have to investigate what is the state of mind lying behind that, what's the belief, what's the view, and bring mindfulness, pay attention to what we're doing, rather than doing it in a habitual way. Say, well, I've done my ritual, I go home, I've been purified, my life should improve now. That's not guaranteed simply by doing an action. It all depends on your state of mind. It's like something like sprinkling holy water. Sometimes monks make holy water, they chant paritas, bless the water, and then sprinkle it on special occasions like house blessings or some special occasion. And you might say, well, that just looks like superstition, hocus pocus, and it can obviously be treated in that way. But chanting the paritas is a good thing. It's remembering the teachings of the Buddha. Meditating, developing states of mindfulness and samadhi as you chant can be a very powerful kind of good karma. It has its own good effect on the mind. Maybe even people listening to the chanting can become inspired, faith arises, their mind becomes more wholesome. And then you have this water and you sprinkle the water. Well, if it leads people to reflect on the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, reflect on the teachings, increases their faith, maybe that could be one factor that leads to supporting their practice for reducing craving and attachment. But if people are not practicing mindfulness, reflecting on it, well, it can just become a superstition as well. But I wouldn't dismiss the holy water completely or out of hand. If it's made by a monk or a group of monks who have developed some skill in meditation, it can seem to have quite a powerful effect. And I remember I used to live with Lumpur, and down the road was a teacher called Lumpur Kram, who was considered to have very strong samadhi, and his holy water was renowned throughout Thailand. He was about 100 years old when he died, 101 I think. And just before he died, people would be queuing up every day to get blessed by him. And he was so old and frail that he couldn't really sprinkle the holy water anymore. He could make it and bless it, but he couldn't sprinkle it. So his devotees made him a little pump. Very small, silent pump. It was a mechanical pump that was very silent, and it would spray a fine mist so that he could just hold this little hose pipe and the pump would be turned on. He could sprinkle this mist of water all over the assembled people, because sometimes you might have 100 people sitting there. I remember we went one time just to pay respects to him, and a lot of lay people came along because they all had faith in him, and a few of them had ailments, and there was one nun who had a terrible back pain for many years, and after being sprayed by his holy water went back to the monastery and said, "Oh, my back pain is gone. It's the first time it's gone for a long time." So holy water can have its own effect. Maybe it just brings up faith and wholesome thoughts. You get sprinkled by it. One person might not have any faith, so it's just like you say, an empty ritual. But another person, it may bring up skillful states of mind and just boost their practice in a small way. I once had a really good experience. I was meditating on the full moon night, and we're doing all-night meditation practice, sitting and walking right through the night. And about 1 a.m. I was feeling really thirsty, so I walked over to Lumpur Anand's kuti, and underneath his kuti he had a big pile of water bottles that monks could go and take and have a drink of water. But that evening I didn't know there'd been decanting some holy water made by Lungta Mahabua, who's considered arahant. So I'm sure his holy water was specially blessed, supercharged. And there was one bottle of his holy water with his name written on it, on a table, and then a lot of other bottles of ordinary water, not holy water, not blessed water. And I went over in the dark, because it was middle of the night, and I just wanted a bottle of water, so I picked up the first bottle I came across, which happened to be Dhamma was holy water, but I didn't know. I thought it was just ordinary water. And I picked it up and drank the whole bottle because I was really thirsty, then walked back to the hall to carry on sitting, and within a few minutes I was sitting up really straight, full of energy, and my samadhi got really strong, and I sat all the way till dawn without moving, in really good state of samadhi, which is unusual because most people, as you sit through the night, things get harder, it gets tired, late, and you just want to fall asleep maybe. But that night, no sleepiness, no hindrances, deep samadhi. It was only in the morning when somebody came across and said, "Who drank Longta Mahaboa's holy water?" that I realized my mistake. But it was one of those mistakes I didn't really regret because I had a really good meditation all night long. But I didn't know I'd drunken holy water, so it wasn't like you get the message you've drunken the holy water and then you feel inspired. I drank the holy water without knowing it was holy water. So it was an interesting little experiment in belief and the power of belief, and then when you don't know what you've drunk the holy water, there's no belief there, then the holy water shouldn't work, should it? But it did. So another question: how do we deal with the feelings of insecurity and uncertainty about the future? Well, a kind of rule of thumb, standard practice in the Buddhist path is establish mindfulness of what's going on. So say you're feeling anxious or insecure, try to have a technique that helps you to establish mindfulness. It could be following the breathing, so you take a few moments to establish mindfulness on your breathing. And your breathing may be affected when you feel anxious, you breathe maybe faster or coarser breath. But as you put attention on the breath, then you can also know your state of mind, your emotional state, physically how you feel, mentally how you're feeling. That's the first thing. So if you are feeling insecure, well, just establish awareness. Oh, I feel insecure and it feels like this. I feel tense, my mind is thinking a lot. Whatever the symptoms and the conditions of that state of mind bring, whatever they bring with it, whatever it brings with it, then know that with mindfulness. And then you might know, well, this is suffering. When I'm anxious or feeling insecure, I'm not peaceful, I'm not happy. That's already turning your insecurity into something good because you're seeing the suffering of it and you're learning from that. And that leads you to maybe want to change your experience, end that insecurity and anxiety so that you don't suffer so much. How can you do that? Well, if you become more skilled in following the breathing, doing the breathing meditation, you practice that every day. Maybe that's all you need to do is just come back to the breath and calm your mind down that way and let go of the thoughts and the emotional state of insecurity. Sometimes we use some wise reflection as well. So if it's about the future, feeling overwhelmed by worries about what's going to happen to you or somebody you love, health matters, money matters, the world is going to fall apart, whatever it may be, you can introduce some wisdom and you reflect on the impermanent, uncertain nature of things, and that whatever your mind throws up about what may happen or may not happen in the future, it's not sure. Nobody can predict with 100% accuracy what's going to happen in the future. hasn't happened yet, and there's so many factors in your life, in the lives of others, and then in nature that you can't control, you can't predict. You have to become more familiar with the uncertainty of the world and life. And when I say become more familiar, if you reflect on it and you become more mindful of impermanence, you become used to noticing that, and then that can help remove a lot of insecurity, because you just accept that's the way of nature, of reality. So you can't control everything, you can't know everything. You can only control up to a certain level in your life, what's going to happen, how you are, where you are, what's going on. Beyond that, you have to accept it. There's a lot of uncertainty, but it doesn't mean to say you have to suffer with it. You just know it. Oh, it's uncertain. I can't be sure what's going to happen. And as you question and investigate your insecurity and bring up the wisdom, say the understanding of impermanence and other reflections, then you're changing your state of mind from being one of being more unskillful, worrying, anxious, to one of just gaining some insight into what's actually going on at that moment in your mind, and then your view of the world and what you're seeing. You're changing it for the better. So a lot of it, the suffering of anxiety and insecurity, starts to fade as you investigate it. So what do you know for sure? Well, you know if you have a mind state that is wholesome right now in the present moment, that will bring you a feeling of ease, happiness. So for example, if you bring up the thought of goodwill to yourself, wishing yourself well, goodwill, wishing other people well, that's accompanied by a good feeling. It brightens your mind. Your mind tends to be in a better state for that thought. So if you bring up a thought of loving kindness, goodwill, that's going to result in various good things happening in your mind, improvements in your state of mind. So if you do that more often, that's creating the causes for more good things to happen in your future. So it's the direct opposite of anxiety and feeling overwhelmed about the future. If you focus on developing kindness, mindfulness in the present moment, that's conditioning or being a cause for a better future for you. This is on the inside. What happens in the world on the outside? Well, maybe there's not a lot you can do to influence it. There's some things you can do, but not a lot. But on the inside, you can influence your state of mind and what's going on moment by moment through your day, through your life. That much you can do. And maybe just getting used to accepting the uncertainty of life and being at peace with that. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or next year, in the future. But that's all right, because more important is what you're doing right now. And if you're looking after your mind and trying to cultivate skillful states of mind and skillful actions, skillful speech right now, then you're practicing in the right way. It's good enough. You don't need to go too far beyond that. You can make plans for the future, of course, and plans based on what you understand, what you know, what you have to do in life, but you know that those plans will never always be exactly as you predict. They won't come to fruition exactly as you predict. Sometimes things get better they turn out better than you planned. Sometimes worse, sometimes more or less the same. But it's uncertain, that much you know. So you use wisdom and developing skillful reflection to help keep your mind more at ease in the present, and then the future comes from the present, doesn't it? If you just give in to your anxiety, you attach to it, identify with it, give in to it all the time, well, of course, it will tend to get worse, come up more often,
And in the future you're going to experience more of it because you're setting the causes in the present by giving into it and holding on to your anxiety, and then it will come up more often in the future. So this is karma, isn't it? The mental states you cling to in the present will be going to come up more often in the future because you're giving them importance, holding on to them, identifying with them. So if you can just stay in the present moment and say, insecurity, so what? Don't give it too much attention, don't give it too much power in your mind. Just say, so what? Insecurity, anxiety, it's just that. That's all it is. If you can be a little bit more, less concerned about it, it's going to have less of a role in your thinking. It's going to have less of a space in your mind. In the mind of the Buddha, say, or an enlightened person, they're just not worried about anything. They've trained themselves to realize worrying doesn't help. Worrying is suffering. So they don't give any importance to worries and anxiety and insecurity. And they understand that real peace comes from the mind that is well trained and understands the truth. Usually we try and find security in material things. We want more wealth, more security around us on the outside. And that's very difficult to control, and it's subject to change, aging and change, and things break apart and degenerate. But the Dhamma that you develop on the inside, in your heart, and this is independent of those kind of changes and the chaos of the world. You can still be peaceful and at ease on the inside, even if the world on the outside is chaotic and full of problems. So you have to get that perspective established. That comes through the practice, particularly from meditation, but also from developing some wisdom, reflecting on things. Another question. My husband died and I feel that he is still around me. What should I do about this? Well, just first of all, just notice the feeling. Pay attention to the feeling, this perception that your husband is close to you. Maybe it's just based on strong memories and past karma of living together and loving each other, so then when the person dies you keep thinking of them, missing them maybe, or just remembering them. So it feels like they're close. So get to know what that feeling is, know what's affecting you, and just observe it. And sometimes it will be strong, and sometimes weak, and sometimes maybe it passes away altogether and it's not in your mind. There'll be times when you're not really thinking of your husband perhaps. So it's impermanent. You can learn that quite quickly and see how your feelings, your perceptions and thoughts change. But deep down maybe there's still a clinging to the memory of the husband, and a wanting him to be here, not wanting him to separate. Because of course if you love someone when they're alive, once they're gone you still have that craving. I want them to be back with me. I wish we could stay together. It's a strong, very deeply rooted feeling in your heart, in your spiritual heart, your consciousness. So you have to start teaching yourself it's impermanent. Life is impermanent. Even the people we love, we have to separate through death. And when we separate, the Buddha said, the 5 khandhas, the body, the mind of each person, break apart. In the sense, you can't turn the clock back. Once somebody's died, you're never going to see them again looking like they did, speaking like they did, doing the things they did. You have the memories and you can honour their memory and rejoice in the good memories you have perhaps, but they're never going to be back again, ever, like that, ever again. And that's something you have to keep reflecting on. You can't bring them back. But if you are clinging to them, they say this is one foundation for people to be reborn in the ghost realm. Because that clinging, the person who dies, they die with a mind of clinging to the ones they love, the place, the family. The people who are still alive, their loved ones are clinging to them, so there's a sort of, all this clinging is making them hang around as a ghost, and they can't go on to take a good rebirth yet. So it's cause for their suffering. So mentally you have to let them go. You have to say, it was a good time together, we appreciate all the good you did and the good times, but now it's time to let you go. And there's no need to look back. They don't need to look back at you, they can go on to their next destination. That would be the Buddhist reflection on death. Let them go. Don't cling to them, don't hold on to them. That's selfish, isn't it? You're saying, I need you to be here so that I'm happy. My happiness depends on you being here. But that's selfish. You have to say, oh, you've reached your time, you died before me, off you go. I hope you have a good time where you go next. Wish them well and let them go. Last question. When people show their dislike for us, how should we cope with it? It's not sure. Today they don't like you, tomorrow they might like you again. And the day after that they might dislike you again. It's not sure. We notice this all the time. One person may like you and dislike you, or you meet somebody who likes you today and then tomorrow you meet another person who dislikes you. The world is uncertain and you can't control these things. These are what we call the worldly winds that blow from different sides. Praise and blame, gain and loss, status, loss of status, pleasure and pain. They're uncertain. They're conditioned, and we experience these changes according to our karma, the karmic causes. So if somebody dislikes you and they come along and do things or say things, well, maybe this is the manifestation of some old karma. Maybe in the past you've said things to them, now they're saying things to you. Or you said things to other people and now it's coming back through this person who dislikes you. You can't remember the trail back, the original karma that led up to this event, but you can, through reflection, you can see, well, it's likely I've probably been unkind to someone in the past, now I'm experiencing a bit of unkindness from this person. You just have to accept it, don't you? If it's happened, if it's coming your way, you just have to accept it, deal with it as best you can, be patient. Sometimes we can avoid them, sometimes we just have to be patient and put up with them. But try to keep your mind in a wholesome state. Don't let it get you down. So reflect on the impermanence. Maybe they're not always disliking you and causing you trouble. Maybe sometimes they're fine. Or even if they're, every time you see them, they always dislike you. You're not with them all the time, are you? You meet them and then you separate. Reflect on these things, the uncertainty of people's words, their opinions and beliefs and their words, what they say to us. When Ajahn Chah went to England for the first time, he took the monks out on arms round, walking along the street, which was a very unusual sight back in the 1970s in London. There weren't Buddhist monks wandering around much then. So a few of the monks, Ajahn Sumedho, Ajahn Chah, walking along the road. So at one point they met
4 English teenagers who were a bit aggressive, shouted at them, insulted them, because they probably had never seen monks before and they just thought they were weird or strange, so they came up and were a little bit threatening and shouted at them, and Ajahn Sumedho wasn't sure, what should we do? Will I have to step out and protect Ajahn Chah or not? But in the end, these 4 guys suddenly just disappeared. They just moved away quickly and disappeared, and it was all over. And they went back to the Vihara, and Ajahn Chah turned to Ajahn Sumedho and said, "Oh, I'm learning a lot of things here in England. One day you got people who are very happy to see monks, because they don't have many monks there, coming and making offerings, listening to the Dhamma, speaking in praise of the monks. The next day you meet 4 young lads who are very aggressive and insulting. Everything is teaching. Everything is a teaching." That's your aim in the practice. Establish mindfulness and see what you can learn from the experience. Even the unpleasant experiences are teaching us to be mindful, patient, restrained, tolerant, not give in to our anger, not react with anger. So Ajahn Chah said, "Oh, it's getting a lot of teaching in England." So sometimes when people dislike you, that's your best teaching, because it's really poking you, isn't it? It's getting you to see your attachment to your self, you're identifying with your feelings, your reactions, you're seeing your attachment to your sense of self, and you can let it go. Contemplate, it's not sure. If you're always identifying with the words of other people, your mind is always going to be flipping around. They praise you, you're happy, they criticize you, you're down, and these things are very uncontrollable, uncertain. So establish mindfulness and reflect, this is not sure. So the 8 worldly winds are teaching us about the uncertainty, the impermanence of life. So don't just react and fall into depression or suffering. If someone dislikes you, it's something that's teaching you. You can learn from this experience. That's the good in the experience, even though it may be unpleasant. But there's actually something good in it when it teaches you to see impermanence and then let go. So even painful, unpleasant experiences have some hidden good in them if you use them as a teaching. So, that was the last question tonight. I'll leave it there and wish you all well.